They're under pressure because of one of the tweets that was sent out by the president this morning. Let's take a look at that tweet. We're not going to read all of it, but the part of it that really stands out is he writes, "The countries that send us cars have taken advantage of the U.S. for decades. The president has great power on this issue because of the GM event. It is being studied now." Just from point of reference here, people always ask me, well, where are we getting our vehicles from? Take out Mexico and Canada because of the new trade agreement there. Take out South Korea because of the trade agreement. And just Japan and Europe, which are really the two areas where we could see the president try to invoke some type of tariffs. You're looking about 15% of the U.S. auto sales. Here is the CEO of Volvo talking with us earlier this morning about how devastating new tariffs would be from Europe.
That would really hit the Volvo business and the whole automotive business. And I think the losers will be the consumers, because long-term cars will be more expensive, and of course employment.
And as you take a look at shares of General Motors, we can't stress this enough. Almost every automaker says the same thing. Stick to a trade policy. Once you have that, then we can adjust, and don't add any more tariffs. But as we know, the president often has his own ideas on this. Guys, back to you.
So, Phil, GM potentially faces another tariff issue along with the rest of the auto industry, but also the threat of taking the subsidies away. I was coming through the 10K yesterday. I couldn't find an actual number for the subsidies it gets for electric vehicle manufacturer. Do you have a sense of what that could be?
Well, the manufacturers don't get subsidies. What they do get to use are federal tax credits, $7,500 per vehicle. That goes to the buyer. In other words, if you go in to buy a new Chevy Bolt, and they're getting us out of this tent here, but if you buy a Chevy Bolt, you are allowed to write $7,500 as a tax credit when you file your federal tax return. That helps the automakers then say, look, the actual price is going to be $35,000 instead of $42,000. So that's the difference that you see there in terms of EV incentives.
But that would apply to any company, wouldn't it? Not just General Motors.
Correct.
Correct.
Correct. And GM's incentives are phasing out next year.
And I was just asking Phil about the subsidies, and in their 10K, GM does say that the incentives could be eliminated or exhausted, which may negatively affect our ability to sell electric vehicles in sufficient quantities and at high enough prices to be profitable. It doesn't sound like they're talking about the federal tax credit, which is going to phase out anyway, and GM, for its part, has almost reached that magical number of 200,000 to be sold under the tax credit anyway. So that's definitely going away. So what are we talking about when we talk about subsidies?
I think that's where a lot of questions really surround. What are these threats that he is talking about? Is he talking about, he mentioned briefly about the electric vehicles. Is he talking, he made reference to a chicken tax, which was going to affect mid-sized trucks. But I think it's not really clear as to what, when he's threatening about the subsidies, what is he really referring to? And if there are these subsidies, how is it going to affect the other automakers? Is he also going to punish Ford, who I would imagine would fall in a lot of the same buckets as General Motors, being an American car maker? And that doesn't seem to be something that, he would perhaps be interested in.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, when we're talking about potential tariffs, that's going to affect, Jessica, every automaker, right? I mean, it's almost impossible to just single out General Motors in terms of the impact, the negative impact.
Right, that would be impossible. I mean, there's not just something that's going to affect General Motors and nobody else. So I think as an industry, they're just going to have to think of some, policy that, is fair to everybody or not fair to everybody. I mean, there's a lot of questions around this, but to single out General Motors would be nearly impossible.
All right, Phil, we want to switch gears here, talk about Jeep and its big unveil. What are you going to show us?
Well, we'll show you the new Jeep Gladiator as they tear down the tent here. They showed it about 45 minutes ago. They unveiled it. If you're looking at this and saying, wait a second, is that a pickup truck? It's a combination of an SUV and a pickup truck. Think of an SUV with a flatbed in the back. Remember, Jeep has done this before, and going back from the late 40s all the way through the early 1990s, they had a Gladiator version of a pickup truck. Look, they believe you got a hot brand with Jeep, and you got a hot segment with pickup trucks. Put those two together, they expect this to do well.
I don't know.
We're all looking at it, Phil, like, what is that?
The SUVs keep getting bigger and bigger. I hear Honda's coming out with a bigger one than the Pilot. Is that true?
It's a little bit smaller than the Pilot.
It's smaller than the Pilot. It's not as big?
Right.
Is it a...
Right, something between the CRV.
Something between the... Is it a luxury SUV or what? What? Why would you need that?
It is. Well, it's a difference between a crossover and an SUV. Tyler, we're to the point, Tyler, where we're going to start saying it's bigger than a breadbasket, and you're going to have to guess exactly what the size is. But they're all these categories. It's hard to say one is definitely an SUV these days versus a crossover.